Welcome to Mindset Mastery Moments, the podcast dedicated to helping you unlock your full potential through the power of mindset. Join Dr. Alisa Whyte, a transformative creator and multi-award-winning trailblazer, as she guides you on a journey of self-discovery and empowerment. With a background in corporate leadership and workforce development, Dr. Alisa has dedicated her career to inspiring individuals to achieve their goals and dreams. Known as the #1 mindset disruptor, she firmly believes that the key to success lies within the mind. Dr. Whyte has witnessed the incredible impact a shift in mindset can have on one's life, career, and relationships. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just beginning your journey of self-discovery, you'll find valuable lessons, inspiring stories, and practical tools to elevate your life. In each episode, Dr. Alisa engages with thought leaders, coaches, and changemakers from around the globe, exploring their journeys and the mindsets that have propelled them to success. Get ready to reframe your perspective, embrace challenges, and cultivate the mindset necessary to achieve your dreams. Now let's dive into today's episode and discover how to master your mindset for a brighter, more fulfilling future.
Hello, disruptors, and welcome to another episode of Mindset Mastery Moments with yours truly, Dr. Alisa Whyte. Today's episode is all about a mindset shift that's revolutionizing the way we view leadership. As the saying goes, humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. And in leadership, this couldn't be more true. In fact, research shows that the humble leaders not only drive better performance, but also foster more collaborative and innovative environments. A Harvard Business Review study revealed that humble leaders were 5 times more likely to be rated as high performing by their teams. Yet only about 10% of leaders truly embrace humility as a cornerstone of their leadership style. Our guest today is on a mission to change that. Today, we are going to be speaking with a veteran executive, coach, professor, and ultra endurance champion. He is also the founder of Radical Humility Leadership Institute. He's here to share his powerful insights on humble leadership. His latest book, Radical Humility: How to Be a Badass Leader and a Good Human, has been described by Dr. Marshall Goldsmith as a game-changing book that redefines leadership in our modern world. Today, it is my honor and my pleasure to welcome Urs Koenig. Urs, we welcome you to Mindset Mastery Moments.
Thank you so much for having me, Alisa. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
Urs, let me tell you, I believe that we are at the top of the era, and you are definitely something that we look forward to in Mindset Mastery Moments, because I believe in humility. Personally, it's one of my own core values, but you know what? It's not about me. Let me tell our viewers and listeners a little bit more about you. Urs Koenig is an executive coach, keynote speaker, and former NATO peacekeeping commander, UN peacekeeper, ultra endurance champion, and a professor. With decades of leadership experience in both military and corporate worlds, Urs has a new book that's called, you guessed it, Radical Humility, which I have a full copy of, both ebook and a hard copy. It is a beautiful, I would say, tool for leaders. His framework that challenges the old heroic model instead champions humility as the key to empowering teams and fostering true collaboration. With a passion for storytelling and deep expertise in leadership, Urs's work resonates with leaders across various sectors, including healthcare, government, tech, and sport. Urs, once again, we welcome you, and in your own words, tell us who you are and what you do.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Well, I have a few identities, maybe a few stories. So I have an academic background. Way back, I was a geographer, believe it or not. So I actually wrote the PhD thesis in geography many, many years ago.
Wow.
And then I have the ultra endurance background. You talked about that. I was a competitive cross-country skier in my home country of Switzerland. Then I got into ultra endurance racing, where I learned a lot of lessons, which, make you very humble indeed. Yes. And then I've been in leadership development for the last 20 plus years as an executive coach. And then as a keynote speaker more recently. And then in 2017, I went back into the military after having been out for 22 years and rejoined the Kosovo peacekeeping force with NATO in the Balkans in Kosovo. And then 2 years ago, I was in the Middle East for a year for the UN as a peacekeeper. So, sort of an eclectic background, shall we say.
I love it. It sounds very similar to mine, and I am very humbled to be with you today. When we have the diverse background, it really helps us empower leaders from different perspectives. And when you landed on radical humility, your background makes absolute sense to that. So let's dive right in, Urs. See, here at Mindset Mastery Moments, we do believe in serving, and that leadership is from the perspective of serving. You had such a diverse and impressive background, from being UN peacekeeper and coaching executive at some of the world's biggest companies. What led you to focus on humility as a key component of leadership?
Yeah. Lisa, much like you, it's a personal value of mine as well, right? It always has been. So in the uber competitive world of ultra endurance competition, I was always drawn to competitors who let their legs do the talking versus the big mouth, right? So on a personal level, was drawn to it, but that doesn't make it a crucial piece for leadership. But then when I was coaching and executive coaching, we came out of the financial crisis, social media started to explode, everything started to move faster and faster and faster. A lot of my clients were still leading very top-down, very centralized, command control, and they were always a step or two behind. And so that got me digging into, we need to look at leadership in a different way. And of course, there's situational leadership, transformational leadership. There's so many models out there.
Yes.
But then I came across Edgar Schein's book, Humble Leadership. And Ed Schein, of course, one of the big names in organizational development. And that got me thinking about humility in leadership. And I started to dig in a little bit. And then when I deployed on the 2 peacekeeping missions I just told you about, ironically, going back into the military, like a top-down command control culture, actually showed me that the best commanders I had were deeply humble, deep self-awareness. They built meaningful relationships with the team members. So I sort of rediscovered humility in the military, actually. And then I came back from the second mission a couple of years ago and said, you know what? There's a book here. I'm going to write the book on radical humility and importance in leadership. So that was sort of my journey to the book.
Oh my goodness. And it is such a masterful tool. Look at this. Look at how beautiful it is. I am still diving through it. I will be traveling for the next few weeks, so I have plenty of time to finish my book, but it again is such masterful work. So in the radical humility in your book, and I love this, I love this. Be a badass leader and a good human. I mean, that was my biggest draw in. I mean, a lot of time this tells you that we're going to focus on a certain modality, but this tells you about the action steps, right? Where we can apply principles to the core of what we do every day, right? Not just theoretically, but you outlined 5 shifts that leaders need to make to embrace a more humble leadership model. Can you give us a brief overview of those shifts and why they're so crucial in today's specific landscape of leadership?
Absolutely. So I'll try to make this brief, Alisa. I'll try. So
let's do it.
It's 5 shifts, and they span across leadership of self, one-on-one leadership with my teammates, and organizational leadership, so culture building. So it goes from me to the team to the whole organization. So the first shift is what I call dig deep. And dig deep is all about developing accurate self-assessment, self-awareness. And so this is what people often think of when they think of humility. I see myself accurately, not too low, not too high, in line with how others see me. So as an executive coach, of course, developing self-awareness is very close to my heart.
Yes.
Another piece of digging deep is this notion of focus, having the humility to know that I can't do everything,
Right.
but I can do almost anything if I put my heart and mind into it. And so,
Yes.
for us entrepreneurs, that is something that's very, very important. As athletes, we're outstanding at that,
Yes.
focus and compartmentalize. So that's the first shift. That's about the leadership of self. And then the next 3 shifts are one-on-one leadership. So the first one is what I call tough on results, tender on people. It means holding my people to the highest standards while building meaningful and collaborative relationships with them. So that's the second shift. The third shift is leading like a compass. So rather than leading like a map, as in telling people exactly where to go and what to do, I lead like a compass, showing true north and empower them to get their work done on their own. So that's with lots of freedom, not on their own, but lots of freedom. So that's the lead like a compass. The fourth shift is what I call full transparency. So that means being fully transparent around our goals, our purpose, why are we here, what are we doing? And as leaders, we often, we have to re-record this, as leaders, we often underestimate that our message is actually landing. We cannot over-communicate. So that's about being fully transparent around our goals, our mission. And it also, and that's a bit scary, on a personal level, means being transparent with some vulnerability, which was very dear to my heart, about our own shortcomings as leaders and what we can do better. So that's the fourth shift. And the fifth one is what I call championing a fearless culture. And so this is building a psychologically safe team where it's safe for everybody to speak up with questions, concerns, crazy ideas, whatever it might be, without fear of being shamed or worse, risking their career. So in a nutshell, I tried to make this brief, Alisa, these are the 5 shifts.
Oh, and I love them. I absolutely love the 5 shifts. It's one of the things that, because these are things as a leader and as someone who's led, because leaders, we are in many positions where we're being led. And particularly when you talk about leading as a compass, that is so key. Many leaders struggle here, specifically even when we are even practicing servant leadership. This is why I love the humble leadership and leading from, being from a place of humility. It's another level to me. It's servant leadership 2.0.
Right.
Because when you think about leading as a compass, right, you're actually being what you're asking your followers or subordinates to be. That's how I look at it. And you said being that true North Star, which means you're not perfect, right? But you are clear and you have a clear sense of direction. And you are also clear on who's on your team. And you are maximizing their potential. You're also not, it's only about the company or the organization. It's also, there's a win for them. I call it, there's a WIFM. It's a win-win. You keep creating win-win moments. Tell us a little bit more about leading like a compass, because that one is one of the major ones that stood out to me.
Absolutely. So actually, let me tell you a quick anecdote of how this is exemplified. So
yes.
Former Massachusetts Governor Devil Patrick was in charge when the horrific Boston Marathon bombing happened, right? So we can all remember that horrific outcome.
Yes.
So, and the response to this horrific bombing has been credited as one of the most collaborative and effective responses to disaster ever studied. And the key ingredient of that effectiveness was Governor Patrick's leadership, and it's exemplified how he entered the command center each and every time. Instead of micromanaging and telling people what to do, he would ask, how can I help? And just to be clear, he was leading what I call with his eyes on and hands off, right? Eyes on, hands off. He didn't not make decisions. He was very involved at the high level, allocating resources, making it clear who's responsible for what, jurisdictions, allocating resources, but he let his specialists do the tasks. That is leading like a compass at its best. And one concrete takeaway for those listening and who are in leadership positions is, let's identify our shared purpose as a team. What is, if we had to boil it down, what is the one thing we need to do well to win around here? That's the one thing. And then identify that. So, Costco lowest price, right? For example, Zappos best customer service, and then rally your troops around that true north, that compass, that overall direction, instead of getting involved in the weeds. And just to be clear though, Alisa, I want to be very clear. That doesn't mean that we not sometimes have to be tough, right?
Yes.
I say tough on results on trip. Sometimes the most humble and loving thing is to actually let somebody go. Right.
Yes.
So I will be very clear, we're not humble because we're soft or weak.
It's not
sometimes
the same.
It's not the same at all. Exactly. And we can talk about some of the sort of the pushback we sometimes get or the myths around humble leadership. So it is being incredibly results oriented, tough on results, while taking care of our people, understanding to what you said earlier. Let's understand their career ambitions. I want to know everybody on my team. Where do you want to be in a year, in 3 years? You might not know, but let's have a conversation. How can I help you to get there? I talk about the leadership factory. If you're known as the person in your organization who helps others go to the next level, you become a talent magnet. People will line up because they know when they work for Alisa, they go to the next level. So that's an other aspect of leading like a compass.
I love it. The other one that is a big one too is you introed it already. It's the shift number 2, tough on results, tender on people.
Yeah.
There is a way to be tough on results, tender on people, but not be a pushover at the same time and not be a person where everything goes. Here's the thing, Urs, in my career, I've met a lot of people or leaders who say they are tough on results, and there's no way to not be tough on people. That is a myth to me, because while you might have to be a firm hand at times, how do you balance tough on results and tender on people? What does that truly look like?
We'll be back after a quick break.
Hi, this is Chris Bierling, host of the People and Performance podcast. Each episode features conversations Bill Banham and I have with leaders and consultants about ways they've inspired colleagues to thrive. Past People and Performance podcast guests are from such brands as NASA, IBM, Rolls-Royce, and McKinsey & Co. You can find us on your podcast player of choice.
Excellent question. And I will explain some concrete examples in a second. I think this notion that I either, like what you've heard during your career, and I have too, this notion that I either have to be a kind person or a tough leader is a false dichotomy. So how does this look? I can be incredibly results oriented. I can be super ambitious, and I can still have meaningful and collaborative relationships with our people. And so I'll give you an example. In Kosovo, when I was on my first mission, I had the best commander I've ever had. And he called me to his office, which never happened. I'm like, what's going on? Called me to his office. I took a seat, and he opened the conversation with these words. He said, Urs, I love you. You know I do. And your work is not even close to being good enough. His words made me shrink in my chair. And I'm like, oh my God. And then he was, of course, right. I delivered subpar work. And he didn't just say he loved me. I knew he did. He understood my background. He wanted to help me go to the next level. Because he built this strong relationship with me, I was able to hear his feedback and act on it. And I did, big time. If he would have yelled at me, if he would have been a tough on results and tough on people leader, yelled at me, belittled me, I would have tuned him out. I'm just another, high-ranking officer who's just screaming and yelling. Would have tuned him out. So, it's a really important point. Our feedback, if we're in a leadership position, is much more likely to be heard and acted upon if we've built meaningful relationships with our team members. So it's not a either or at all. And again, sometimes we need to make some tough calls, but we can still do it with respect and humility, no question.
Exactly. I love it. I know Dave Ramsey in his book, Entre Leadership, he shared that he, in his organization, if one of his team members like had an adulterous affair, he would let them go because that's against his company's value system. And I remember him saying that one of the first persons he had to let go had been with the company for several years and was very great employee, but because that was his moral. And he said that he brought him in and they had the conversation and gave him a good severance, but released him. And it was the feedback from that employee was that that was a pivotal thing. It helped him, when he had he was able to have the severance, but he had to really think about his actions and he was able to become just a better human. Because he wasn't encouraged to just do whatever,
Yeah, I think that's such a key. I love that story, by the way. That's such a key point. Ramsey, you, me, everybody in leadership, we're always in the spotlight. People are watching our every move, what we say, what we don't say, how we act, how we don't act.
Absolutely.
And if we are putting up with stuff, it could be, the affair you mentioned, or subpar work, or unethical behavior. If our people observe us putting up with that, they notice big time. And so, and again, we need to step in. And you just told a wonderful story where you can actually make a really tough call in a very grown-up, respectful, and tough way. And by the way, then you don't burn the bridges. I mean, that's another piece, right? So, boomerang employees are on the rise. If you treat your people well, if they leave or you make them leave until the very end, they might actually come back. There's been studies out where 50% of applicants are boomerang employees. So, yeah.
And they will actually, and that's the thing that I believe that's when I thought about it, I remember that story and so many others, even in my own journey, that really tells you being tough on results, but tender on people, it really works for everyone. Because when you're leading from a place of humility, I still like to call being a leader as a facilitator. And so when you're facilitating, you're never out to get you. It's not I'm out to get you. Love it. Full transparency. Last one I want to dig in, because this right here, I see so many leaders that I work with that I've served under struggle with how much do I say and how much do I need to watch over people to make sure that they do a good enough job that I get my job done. And again, it's that I, and I do understand there is an I in leadership. I have my own spiel about that. But if you're playing as a team leader and you're in humility, you are going to have to, number one, build a team that you trust. Because if you don't trust them, just start over. Reshuffle the deck, start over. Tell us about leading with leading like a compass a little bit in terms of when it comes to micromanaging, instead of being a micromanager, being someone who empowers your people to do an excellent job, or just raising up other leaders as well.
Yeah, so I think you're exactly right. So I need to have the right people on my team. So Jim Collins, right seats, right people on the bus, and the wrong people off the bus is very, very clear about it. And it also means that I can delegate and I can empower if my people have a clear understanding about my expectations. That comes back to, being a humble leader, building strong relationships, but still be tough on results. So one thing I often talk to my clients about is how clear are you actually with your team members around the sort of decisions you want them to make on their own versus decisions they need to bring you into. So that's a really helpful exercise. So have a conversation during your one-on-one with each of your team members. What do I expect you to figure out and solve on your own, for example, technical issues? And what are the sort of things I want you to, bring me in? Maybe it's, priority or goals that don't line up, or we're looking at resource allocation. That's the sort of stuff I want to be involved in. And so being clear about what I expect you to do on your own, having clear, responsibilities, roles and rules. And I just talked to a leader, actually, when was it? Like 2 days ago. He has a team's expectation document. So he has a document that he puts in front of every new team member, which outlines his leadership principles and expectations. Let's ask ourselves, how clear have we, all of us who are listening here, how clear have we been around the expectations of our team members, not only in terms of what they need to deliver on a daily basis, but also how we interact with each other, what sort of conversations we're having. So that's a little bit more about how to lead like a compass and not get into the weeds. And then finally, I want to acknowledge one thing. As leaders, we love to be asked for a lot of advice. We love to be involved. Why? It makes us feel important. Let's be honest. Like all of us, sort of actually secretly yearn for that. And that we have to fight. The true test of leadership is how the ship runs when I'm not there. So I challenge actually my leaders to work yourself out of a job. And I know that may be pushing it a little bit, but the idea is, can you be not there for extended periods of time and the business as usual still runs?
Come on.
If the answer is no, then we need to change something.
And it's not something's wrong with your team. It's you.
Me too. Exactly.
I always say, when you see water leaking, you got a leak in the ceiling and it hits the floor. Some are like, where's that coming from? It always comes from the top. So there's no leaking without something being wrong with the roof. So let's just go back to the top. And so when you examine yourself, then you're able to see, well, have I been and what have I done? Do I have the right people in the right positions? Have I empowered them to do what they need to do? And am I providing them the right resources to allow them and to facilitate the essence of their leadership? I think one of the things I've always done with my teams and staff is allow everyone on my team. And I did a lot of educational leadership where I'm leading teachers and, assistant directors and, even the chef and the auxiliary staff, maintenance staff, but they each knew that they were a leader and that it would not be that we would achieve anything without their leadership. And their leadership was essential as what they might view mine as their team lead. And so that concept, I was very young when I developed that. And I didn't know all the leadership principles yet. I didn't get my degrees yet. But it just made sense to my heart. And I believe one of the things, as I said, humility has always been at the core. And so some would say to us, you and I, Urs, that we are one of our major values as humans is humility and servanthood. Now, just for those who that's not their number one trait or something they don't quite understand, in the book, you give a clear definition of what humble leadership is. So for those who have never heard the term, and for those who are, new to it, can you give us that full definition and what that looks like? And then I have a great question that I want us to hear from you in your own personal journey.
Absolutely. So I'll try to make this very succinct. So it's deep self-awareness, number one. Leading relationally versus only by content expertise. Number two, both one-on-one and organizationally. And undergirding is the growth mindset, is seeing mistakes and failures as an opportunity for learning and growing versus something to be ashamed of. Self-awareness, lead relationally, growth mindset. In a nutshell, that's what it looks like.
Oh, wow. And you all see, again, we talk about leadership a lot on this podcast, because all of us are leading somewhere. We might be leading at home, in the community. We're all leading. Leadership is not a special title for corporate people, guys, or government executives. It's for all of us. And I love to say that in leadership is for the person who is in a ship. And so we're all in some kind of ship, whether it's a relationship in our marriage or partnership or whatever that looks like. We're all in relationships. So that's where leadership, it must be. We must lead ourselves. So let's dive into a little bit. You share in the book about a personal story, particularly your experience in Kosovo, where you as an ultra endurance athlete. Can you share that one most humbling moment that you've had and how it shaped your approach to leadership overall?
Well, I had a lot in Kosovo, I have to tell you. So I give you just one, and maybe you're thinking of another one. So I went back into the military after having been out for 22 years. So that means my military knowledge was outdated at the beginning. But I had a command. I was not a very high-ranking officer, but I was a captain. I had a team. And so how do you lead when you know that you actually know less than your people and that you need to get up to speed? And so I intuitively led by relationship. So I made a point of being very also honest and vulnerable about, hey, I still have a lot to learn and I will need your help. And I'm, by the way, working my sweet behind off to get there. Absolutely, no question. But at the same time, I made sure that I got to know each of my team members on a meaningful level. And one of the first things I would do is I would take my teammates for lunch and learn about their backgrounds, their work outside of the military. We have a national service model in Switzerland, so everybody has is a civilian primarily. Their hopes and concerns for their mission, and also their expectation of me as their leader. So I intuitively practiced the relational aspect of humble leadership, and I wasn't able to lead by content expertise. But again, I want to be clear: humility is no replacement for competence and skill. So I worked really, really hard to get my knowledge, to where it needs to be. And within a few weeks, a month, I was most certainly there. So that was one pivotal moment in terms of humble leadership for me in Kosovo.
Wow. Oh, I love that story. I remember you sharing that with me when we first met. Awesomeness. And so the follow-up question we go into, we have that segment here on Mindset Mastery Moments where we play a game technically of flip the script, and we talk about these pivotal moments that help us shift our mindset and sort of change everything for us. So the question I have for you is, what was a time in your life when you had to flip the script on your own leadership approach, and how did humility play a role in that change for you?
We'll be back after a quick break.
AI is changing the game of business. Will you be on the winning team? I'm Jordan Wilson, the host of the Everyday AI podcast and your coach to help you learn the X's and O's of AI. Artificial intelligence isn't just a new player in the game, it's a new sport altogether. So if you don't quickly put AI into play, your competitors will run up the score. I've spent my whole life building winning teams, from coaching basketball to working with big players like Nike and Jordan Brand. My next move? Helping you win with Everyday AI. Listen wherever you get your podcasts or on everydayaipodcast.com. Let's tap into AI together and put points on the board.
I'm thinking of actually two. The first one is I was 22. And I'm sorry, I'm staying with the military for a second. So, but I was a very successful NCO, and then I went to officer school, and I was very overconfident, and I messed up big time at the very beginning of officer school. They almost kicked me out, and I wanted nothing more than to become an officer. So I was like that close to being kicked out because I was a bit cocky, because I was so successful before, and overconfident. And so that's probably the first time that I consciously thought about, okay, well, we need to be more humble here, because I wasn't up to that point. And so I was able to turn it around and really embrace a more humble approach of learning and wanting to understand what's going on versus thinking I know everything. So I was a cocky 22-year-old, and that drove the importance of humility home for me. But another one, actually, Alisa, is when I decided at 50 to take a time out from my business, also say goodbye from my teenage boys for extended periods of time, and go back into the military and do these missions. And there were plenty of reasons why I shouldn't and couldn't do it. People telling me I should and couldn't, and I had my own self-doubts. I couldn't and shouldn't. And I actually went back. I was very close with my dad, and my dad inspired me actually when I was a child to do service and mission work like I did. He did a 3-month stint in Mogadishu in Somalia when I was 14 in a refugee camp, and really inspired me. So I flipped the script on myself at 50, going back to my dad and how he led by example by making unconventional changes. And so against all the naysayers, including the gremlins I had in my own mind, I can't at 50 just do that. What about my business? What about my house? What about my family? I did it, and I have not for 1 minute regretted it. It's been one of the most fulfilling and teachable moments of my life.
I love it. And that's those are powerful stories of humility and leadership, which are often seen sort of like the opposites in the industry. For those leaders who are used to that traditional heroic model, how can they start embracing humility without feeling like they're giving up control of themselves? Because that's where you definitely stood in that space in your 20s.
Right.
And then in your 50s, you're like, okay, I'm giving up on everything I sort of know and I'm going in a different path. So that's similar to many people saying, well, I can't have humility as a leader. That's the opposite of being a leader. A leader has to be, heroic. So how do you start embracing humility without feeling like you're giving up control as a leader?
Yeah, so it depends a little bit who I'm talking to. If I have somebody who's more analytically minded, I actually, sort of tell them, look, leading in today's world is by definition humbling, because we have an inversion of expertise. Your people will and must always know so much more than you ever can about their area of expertise. For them to come to you with all the information you so clearly rely on as their leader, they need to trust you. And the only way they do that is if we've built meaningful relationships with them. So that's the first piece. The second piece is, of course, the workforce, the young generation. They want purpose, they want meaning. Yes, they also want money, but they want meaningful relationships at work. So the workforce, the external environment demands it. So that's the response to a more analytically minded person.
Yeah.
If I'm so something very concrete. When's the last time during your one-on-one, which I hope you have every week with your team members, by the way, when's the last time you asked for feedback on what you are doing well as the manager and what you can do better? And let's not do this every 6 months or every 12 months. So it's a scary thing we have to do. Let's get into the habit of doing this on a weekly basis. That's one concrete thing we can all do. Let's give your teammates a heads up during the all hands meeting. Hey, I'm going to ask you for some feedback so they're not blindsided. And then, what am I doing well as your manager? What can I do better? If you're not comfortable with that question, you might ask, where do you want me to be less involved? Where do you want me to be more involved? Which comes back to a discussion we had earlier. So start asking for regular feedback from your teammates. That's one concrete small thing we can all do to move towards humble leadership.
Ooh, that is so big, because I'll tell you what, I've sat in organizations where they do that. Can you provide feedback? And or the response will be, well, we're not doing that. We're not looking into that right now. Okay. All right. So, yes, but that is only because so they're doing it because, you and I went into the cooperation and we've coached them into the model of doing these one-on-ones and getting feedback, but they don't want to deal with it. They're so done.
Right.
They wouldn't dare. How do you, I call that toxic leadership. However, you have worked with some of the biggest names in the corporate world. Can you share how radical humility has transformed their leadership and their organizations like Amazon and Microsoft? Because I know you've worked with those.
So, Amazon is just a wonderful example. And I think to be clear, I have not worked personally with Satya Nadella, but I have keenly studied his leadership. If you compare his leadership to the Steve Ballmer era, very loud, very top-down command control, very energetic, we can say that. Satya Nadella really transformed the tech giant around the culture around his personal values, curiosity, and a growth mindset is actually part of the curriculum at Microsoft, the growth mindset and humility. And it shows up in how he leads himself. To your point earlier, the league is in their ceiling. It's at the top, right? So he messed up when during an interview a few years ago, he was asked about unequal pay for women. And I don't know if you remember that story, but he responded back, well, you sort of, I'm simplifying it here. You just trust your karma. It will happen over time.
Yeah.
The same night, He realized that he messed up big time in his response, and he came back immediately, owned his mistake with some vulnerability, corrected himself, say, I was wrong, apologized, and then outlined what is he going to do going forward to not make that same mistake again. That's how much, it doesn't get more powerful than that. You know, the CEO of Microsoft. I have one other quick example. The CEO, the former CEO of the financial technology company Intuit, Brad Smith, he volunteered to his board to do a 360. Now, a 360, for those of you on the call, and that's, exactly, surveying everybody around you, and Alisa and I know this tool well, around your strengths and weaknesses as a leader. And when you do it for the first time, it's a very scary exercise because it's anonymous. But Brad Smith, see, he volunteered. Nobody told him as the CEO to do it. He volunteered to his board to do it. He then shared his 360 report, so the assessment by other people on his leadership, with the whole company. He emailed his 360 report to every single person in the company. He even taped a copy to his office door for everybody to see. So, he shared his strengths, weaknesses, and action steps with vulnerability and built huge trust across the whole organization. And most importantly, made it safe for everybody to go, you know what? If the CEO shares his weaknesses, maybe I can start working on mine as well.
Exactly.
So two powerful examples of humble leadership in action right now in the corporate world.
Perfect. I love those examples. And it's exactly what it is. I think it's one of the ways, even with the podcast, many of the leaders like yourself, you come on and you in vulnerability. It's one of the biggest things. I believe that a key aspect of the growth mindset is vulnerability. And if we're able to be vulnerable with ourselves, we win. But it's a collective win when we're able to be vulnerable outside of ourselves, with our teams, with our spouse, with our children. When people connect, I have this quote where I say, vulnerability opens up doors that you didn't even know existed. And that's where that relational leadership will be emphasized. If you're sitting there and you're listening, like you said, you take your teammates out to have a meal or something and have just conversations as two humans. Hey, a good human. I'm a badass, being a badass leader and a good human. When you're doing that, I see a lot of leaders doing it to sort of take information out of people that they've seen them use against those people later on. Very sad. But however, in that positive way, you're actually learning who they are because you're not leading their role. A lot of times we're leading their role, their functions, but we're leading people. We're facilitating their magic, their expertise, but we're leading humans. And so when you're a good human, you connect with them as a person, without infringing. I've seen leaders who they think that being a good human is going around and checking their staff all the time. And it's not what you do, it's how you do it.
Right.
And so how would you say that you maintain that constant communication and contact that doesn't seem overwhelming to your teammates or your team? Some people like to say subordinates. How do you maintain that real good, genuine conversation that's ongoing without feeling like you're checking up on them all the time? How do you do that?
I think that's an excellent question. So, that's why leadership, as I like to say, is a thinking person sport, right? So it really is. And so, and I think one of the things that come up for me when I hear you talk and in response to your question is, come back to the one-on-ones. And so the one-on-ones you have with your team members are your most important and most powerful tool, because that's the 30 or 45 minutes. And don't reschedule them because you're traveling. Don't make excuses. Like, it should be a non-negotiable. It's one of the most important meetings you have. So that's the time that you deepen and build relationships. And by the way, I want to be very clear. Being vulnerable or leading with humility does not mean that I have to bare my soul open and start every meeting crying and my parents really never loved me. Like, that's not it. It's being at eye, but people, that they overdo it then and come back and challenge like that, right? So it's being at eye level with my teammates, maybe sharing something I'm not quite sure about. Hey, I'm thinking about this or that, or share a personal goal I have, showing that I'm too a work in progress. So I think it's very important, though, to come back to your question. Relationship building does not mean I'm constantly walking around and checking in on people. No, we and in today's remote world anyway, many people at home, dispersed teams, I have regular check-ins with you once a week at least, where we talk about, relationship building and any issues you have. But in the meantime, I don't need to constantly check in on you just to build a relationship. Absolutely not.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And again, some of your team members may want you, and that's why I think you shared with the Boston Marathon bombing and how the chief responded. He asked people. I feel like one of the things I aim to do is not to put everyone in one brand or umbrella. It's how would you like for us to facilitate this part of the work with you? And, there's going to be, things you do unit and across the board, blah, blah, blah. But understanding, for example, like I might be leading, 10 different locations across the country. And each city is so different. So for me to say, oh, yeah, this is what we do all across the board. While I have a team member saying, it doesn't work for Phoenix. It does not work for us in Phoenix because of the demographic we're serving or what we've experienced. I have to listen and say, that doesn't work. Okay, what works? Tell us. And, what will we need to facilitate that change? Oh, you don't know? Well, figure it out and come back and let us know. And you got it. Whatever you need to make it work. Because the goal is the same, but how they get there is different. And the same thing go with the interaction of each team member. It's going to look differently. For example, I don't like people in my space all the time. I like having warm conversations, but if you come into my space every hour or 2 hours, it's going to drive me nuts. Whereas for Jane, she might absolutely love that. But what I've taught individuals in my workforce training is, as a team member, you have to articulate. So what you do is get your leader to decide. It goes both ways, right? Emotional intelligence and also that open communication. And you also, as a team member, being a good human, is say, you know what, Urs, I don't like when you do this. Or say, you know what works for me? I like it better when you. And this doesn't work for me when you. And I haven't seen anyone not respond to it. Even the toughest cookie has responded. Thank you for letting me know.
There's such a great point you bring up, Alisa, and this is the platinum rule of leadership. The golden rule states, treat everybody the way you want to be treated. It's very self-centered, by the way. The platinum rule says, I treat everybody the way they want to be treated. That's exactly what you're saying. You have 10 different team members. Sure, you have values, as you said, across the board, certain things, principles, whatever. But then, and you got to love people, by the way. I hate to break it to all of us. That's what I deep down truly believe. As a good leader, I need to fundamentally love people. I truly believe that. You don't have to be an extrovert. I'm not saying that. No. But you have to fundamentally love people. And so anyway, great point.
And that's a great point, fundamentally loving people. And that is why sometimes folks would say, well, she's not a nice person. How do you put up with her? Well, first of all, like you said, fundamentally, I believe there's good in each of us. And we're all a work in progress, period. That's it. All of us as humans. And then as a person, I'm always looking for the good. And that's where that love, fundamentally loving people, comes in. So you're able to be in a space of less judgment and more understanding, right? And once you do that, now, once you're there, you're tackling issues. That's where you're tough on
results, tender on people. Exactly.
There we go. And so it's easy. So people know that when you're being tough, it's because you're being tough on the outcomes. Yeah. And the toughness, I would say, is we all will get tough on why we have not succeeded and what we're missing to that we're not getting our goal. So it wouldn't just be me being tough. When you build that relationship and that trust and everyone feels safe because they know you fundamentally care, then it's a team effort. It's like, you know what? Yes, Dr. Whyte, we did not get it. And here's what I'm thinking. It was me. I missed out on this piece. And I think, Dr. Whyte, you lacked out on this piece. So now we have this genuine, honest conversation where I, as the leader, they're giving me a review and they're giving themselves as a review. And as a team, we're all doing that. And within a short space of time, we're able to figure out where is that leak coming from, right? And again, it's always at the top. But because it's at the top, it would have affected layers in your ceiling. There are layers, right? And that's where it all funnels down. But then there's the other piece about, again, loving people fundamentally. This is where when you put humble leadership and radical, this entire system, I call it a system, into practice, you don't come over inauthentic. Because there's so many people who are trying to check the boxes in this book and so many other leadership modalities and principles, but they're genuinely at the core, they don't really love people and they don't even like the people they work with. So give us some guidance here for that authenticity for so many leaders who are just new to the humility concept. And what would you say should be those first steps that they should incorporate in their mindset and in their leadership style so they can be authentic and genuine with this? Because let's face it, it might be easy for some to go, oh, I can do this because they genuinely are there. But how do you get those leaders to connect with that true love of humanity and then bringing themselves into humility? What steps should they take so they can really do this with authenticity?
So, I'm thinking in my mind, I often talk about this as I'm listening to you. I'm often talking about this notion, this notion that you have to love people. And then, I'm not even sure I love the members of my family. Now you ask me to love my teammates.
That's true.
So, look, I truly think that a lot of what I write about in the book, what humility in leadership is all about, is a fundamental, in line, of course, with your wonderful podcast, is a fundamental mindset shift. So it is a mindset shift away from this heroic paradigm. By the way, that's nobody's fault. It's been handed down from generations before us. The leader has to know it all, do it all, be involved in everything, to the more humble approach where I'm, as you said, a facilitator. I'm also a guide. I'm a facilitator, but I'm not the heroic leader who needs to do it all on their own. And so that is the mindset shift. How do we get there? I don't really coach much anymore, but that is a perfect engagement for an executive coach to work with. So what are the mindset shifts I can work through? And it doesn't have to be a coach. It could be a mentor as well, or a colleague, to shift from what I may have done in the past, the heroic, to the humble. And, in speaking with Marshall Goldsmith, I argue what got you here won't get you there. The very things that might have made you successful up to this point might actually be in the way of going to the next level. And so for those of you who may be a bit less open to humble leadership, I would challenge you on this, got you here, won't get you there. Yes. So that's on the mindset. And then the practical things, I have a bunch of exercises, QR codes throughout the book. It's mindset shift and behavioral changes on the ground. And sometimes we need to change behavior first and try things on a little bit. And then maybe the mindset shift comes a bit later. And we're not fake. We're not inauthentic because of that. In fact, I often argue when I work with leaders that if you're not feeling a little bit uncomfortable and maybe almost a little bit not like yourself because you haven't done that, that means you're trying something new. It's maybe a bit scary, but that's where the growth lies. And, as I often say, growth lies behind door number discomfort. Growth lies behind door number discomfort. So we need to be a little bit uncomfortable to actually affect change.
I love it. Perfect. And listen, I'm going to say this, everything that he has discussed here is so well laid out in the book. And I love the exercises of now leadership now. This is do this now. And there's so many exercises and there's actual, like I said, in this book, practical steps to begin implementing humility and radical humility in your practice as a leader or in your own life. And maybe you're just thinking about leadership and you might have been told you're too nice, you're too easygoing, you're too of a caring person to be a leader. That is a false true. As a matter of fact, those are the people who win, but you're going to need those tools to understand how to be tough on the results and still maintain that tender, loving person that you are on people. And that's what I believe this book is an absolute handbook for. And now, Urs, we get to that point where we do mindset bites to go, where you take about 90 seconds to address as if it was your last time, if you were giving your last words to the world. What would you say to them on radical humanity? So I will jump off screen and let you take right over.
Way to put me on the spot, Alisa. Absolutely. The last 90 seconds of my life. So I would only say this. Let's come to an understanding that humility is not being weak. It's not being not results-oriented. It's not being not confident. It's not being not ambitious. And in fact, we're thinking about it, in order to really show up with confidence, I need to be fundamentally humble and vice versa. So for me to invite feedback, for example, from my teammates with some humility, I need to have a strong sense of self to actually ask that question because it's scary, and then hear the feedback and act on it. So if you only take one thing away, take away that humility is really the future of leadership, and that confidence, ambition, and decisiveness are not counter to humble leadership. And that will be all.
Woo! So powerful. Thank you, Urs. It was just a phenomenal episode. It went by so quickly. But we have to be able to tell our listeners and viewers where they can get this masterpiece and this, I would say, manual to becoming a humble leader. Where can we find it?
Absolutely. So, well, anywhere where books are sold, Amazon, of course, in the US, and your local independent bookstore or Barnes & Noble. And, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. And we connect with you at
Urs Koenig, URSKOENIG.com for my keynote speaking and my workshops.
And as you all know, all of his information will be in the description wherever you're watching or listening to this episode. Urs, it has been such a phenomenal episode. Thank you so much for joining us. Your insights into humble leadership have been incredibly inspiring. And I'm sure our listeners and viewers are being left with a new perspective on what it truly means to lead. For those of you listening, I highly recommend picking up this book by yours truly here with us today, Radical Humility. Be a badass leader and a good human. This book is not just for executives. It is a must read for anyone in a position of leadership or those who are training and anticipating being a leader. Whether you're running a company or you have your own company, your team and your household will benefit from what he teaches here. I personally will be using it as a tool and recommending it for our youth development board and Mindset Mastery 360, as I believe the earlier we get this type of mindset inside of our young people, the brighter our future is. And remember that your journey to mastering your mindset is ongoing. But with tools like this one, we can all become better leaders and overall just better humans. Again, thank you so much for tuning into Mindset Mastery Moments with this special episode with Mr. Urs Koenig. And we thank you. Remember that the mindset is the key to your success, and it is definitely key to your leadership success. Until now, myself and Urs say goodbye.
Thank you.